at Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development. Policy Research Institute Pried is a policy think tank dedicated to working for climate justice and clean energy in Pakistan. Thank you everyone for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to discuss the net metering growth in Pakistan, challenges and barriers downing the growth of the net metering, and most importantly, the way forward to improve the potential of net metering systems. To facilitate the discussions, we have 4 distinguished guest speakers with us from diverse background. So our first guest speaker will be Ms. Naila Soleh. She is a project manager at Agora Energy Wendy. She is also affiliated with Pried as a technical advisor. Most of her work is focused on socio-technical transition, including net metering and decentralized renewable energy applications. And the next guest speaker is Ms. Amina Sohail. She is currently running her consultancy in field of regulations, legal services, and similar areas under the name of Precision Advocates and Consultants. Previously, she has been associated with PPIB in EFRA, Ministry of IT and Telecom in capacity of legal and advocacy. And our next guest speaker is Ms. Amjad Islam, Mr. Amjad Islam. He's a Deputy Manager, Regulation Affairs in Market Implementation and Regulatory Affairs Department of PESCO. He has robust experience of 20 years in Pakistan power sector. He is working for the transition of Pakistan energy sector from single buyer model to wholesale models. And our last guest speaker is Dr. Syed Atif Pervez. He is a material scientist with over 10 years of R&D experience in diverse academic and commercial organizations in North America, Europe, and Asia. His focus is on development of advanced lithium-ion batteries for commercial electric vehicles and stationary storage applications. So before starting our session, I would like to invite Mr. Badr Alam for the welcome for formally inviting. Thank you for formal welcome to you all. Over to you, Badr Sahab.
Thank you, Rida, and welcome to all the distinguished guests and panelists to this webinar. Pried is really grateful for all of you to have spared your time for this discussion on a very important topic, which is often ignored in the policy circles in Pakistan. As you already know, and as you perhaps better know than I do, that Pakistan has a huge potential for producing electricity through solar panels and and installing rooftop solar and connecting it with the grid to reduce your own bill and also provide energy to the national grid is something that was unthinkable or unthought of a few years ago, like in the late 90s and early 2000s. Nobody spoke of that. But in recent times, we've seen that many countries have incentivized that kind of a connection between rooftop solar and the national grid. And they have done it so successfully that now rooftop solars in a country like Germany produce a substantial amount of energy and produce and inject it in the national grid. In Pakistan, as I said earlier, we have a huge potential for this, but there are a number of barriers which hinder its way, which stop it from becoming a real good opportunity for both the consumers and the producers and distributors of electricity in Pakistan. Those barriers will be discussed in this discussion later on in great detail, but I would like to point towards only a couple of them. One of them is the traditional bureaucratic inertia that Pakistan is suffering from. If you want to install a rooftop solar and if you want to link it with the national grid, you require a special metering equipment. And that metering equipment not just costs you, it also requires a huge amount of bureaucratic processes and procedures, which is not in everyone's capability to get done very quickly and very efficiently. And sometimes people also complain of bribery and corruption in this process as well. So it really takes sometimes weeks and sometimes months for ordinary consumers to get those special equipment and meters installed. And this discourages people, not just because it wastes a lot of time that they do not want to waste on that, it also gives them the impression that the state is doing a favor to them, that they are not really being treated as equals in a transaction between the the consumers of electricity and the producers and distributors of electricity. So that is a problem that I think can be then seen at a larger, at a broader canvas as well. People who want to invest in Pakistan's energy sector complain of similar things at like the corporate level as well. So I think that one hurdle is something that perhaps is beyond the capacity of this webinar to discuss and address. But there are many other hurdles that this seminar can address. For instance, one is offering sufficient financial incentives to the producers of equipment of solar energy. The other is to offer some real incentives to the people who can install rooftop solars and then can inject their excess electricity into the national grid. And the third is to develop some kind of a technical mechanism or technical methodology that not just ensures the safety and stability of the solar systems that are uh, installed on people's rooftops, but also the safety and stability of the national grid. I've heard, I'm not an expert in this, but I've heard that once you inject your rooftop solar electricity into the national grid, there are fluctuations and then there are other problems that the grid suffers from. So that problem also needs to be tackled and also needs to be addressed. And I'm hoping that in today's webinar, some of the speakers will be taking up these three hurdles that I have just mentioned and elaborate on them, and not just discuss those hurdles in detail, but also offer viable and sustainable solutions. Uh, as this webinar is also self-evident in the sense that uh, Pakistan can benefit from this rooftop solar installation system. And we have a huge amount of potential in this, but this potential, like so many other potential that we have, will go waste if the policymakers do not really focus on creating an environment and a policy environment for this sector to prosper. So far, the signs are not really good. But with hope and with some effort, we should think that the policymakers will really alter their paths and alter their ways and means to encourage this sector and encourage people to not just install rooftop solars, but also encourage them to be the contributors to the national grid in such a way that they get the financial benefit in terms of reduced bills for themselves and also add to the ever short electricity supply that we have in Pakistan. With this, I welcome you again to this webinar, and I look forward to a very strong, very powerful, and very stimulating discussion. Thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Padar Saab, and I hope that we will be covering all the issues that you pointed out, and we will be addressing these issues and find us strategies for them. So before starting the session, I would like to introduce the house rules for today's session. Every speaker will have 15 minutes to put their point of view, and at the end of the session, we will have 10 minutes for the question answer session. And during the session, if you have any question, you can just put it in chat box, and our speakers will answer this session after the answer the questions after their time. So without wasting any other time, I would like to hand over the mic to Ms. Naila Soleh for our first guest speaker to address the issue. Over to you, Naila.
Thank you, Rida. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation to the webinar. I have prepared a small presentation and let me share it. I will need the host to enable me to share the screen.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I hope everyone could see my screen. So overall, when I was preparing my presentation, I was not sure whether I should reflect more on the significance of net metering or whether I should cover the challenges and the barriers in the existing socio-technical system responsible for the restricted usage of net metering. And I decided in the favor of significance because I mean, it is quite disappointing that when it comes to the debate on energy transition, much of the oxygen in the room is dominated by utility-scale renewable energy projects, and net metering and small decentralized renewable applications have not received the attention that they deserve. And overall, coming back to the question that why should policymakers focus more on net metering, I think an important argument for this could be a strong economic attractiveness. What we are seeing in the power sector of Pakistan currently is that the overall basket price of energy has gone up significantly, and this is because of two factors. One, that Pakistan has added a lot of capacity in a very short span of time in the past few years, and this has increased the capacity charge component of the energy cost. And in parallel, we have this ongoing crisis with Ukraine, and the fuel prices have spiraled too. So the fuel component of the energy cost has also increased, and overall, we are struggling with the high burden of the energy cost, and this could be conveniently eased with the large distributed generation, large quantum of distributed generation. And I'm for those audience who do not know, in this webinar I would be using the term DG, solar distributed generation, and net metering interchangeably. So yeah, how with net meter, I mean, an important dimension or about net metering is that you can devolve the capacity payment charges to the decentralized actors with these systems. And yeah, this is not often reflected in our policy initiatives. And then there are also several studies which points out that the net meter systems in Pakistan have already reached grid parity, and we can it could produce energy at 2 to 3 times less cost than the grid provided energy, and this is even before the dramatic price hike that we are talking about. So maybe now we are talking about even lower relative energy prices. So overall, with more net metered systems, if more distributed generation is poised to come online, we can effectively reduce the overall cost of the energy, which is quite important in the existing scenario or contemporary situation that we have. And another interesting dimension about net metering is that Pakistan actually have to maintain a very big installed capacity just to meet the peak demand. And we have this peak demand mostly in the summer season when people start relying on in large numbers on cooling appliances. And the production profile of solar PV and the load demand profiles, these two perfectly complement each other. This means that when solar production power peaks, this is also when the demand peaks, and so they are perfectly aligned. And overall, a higher share of quantum of net metering, with higher share of net metering over time, we could probably be looking at more flattened demand curves. And this could curtail the need for maintaining a high centralized installed capacity. And to further add into this, Pakistan also have this long-standing challenge of transmission and distribution losses, and these line losses have also been one important contributor to both the cost of the energy and to these huge financial arrears in the power sector called circular debt. And with net metering, we could have this additional co-benefit of reducing these losses, because when you are consuming energy close to the generation point, this automatically subsides the losses. So, I mean, the economic attractiveness of net metered systems for Pakistan is quite astounding. And in addition to the economic dimension, we also have these excellent preconditions for driving rooftop solar growth, because Pakistan is actually a high excess deficit country, and it has strong driving force for decentralized backups. We also have several studies. For instance, a study which was published by IFC in 2015 showcased that around $2.3 billion are spent annually on alternative lighting. So these demand forces could be utilized for driving the socio-technical transition. And in socio-technical transition, actually the role of the adopters is perceived central. These are the frontline actors who play an important role in the diffusion of any technology. And Pakistan could actually tap on these strong demand forces with the right facilitative environment and supportive policies. And combined with the fact that we have a very ideal dwelling landscape where people tend to live in houses. So we have these huge unutilized rooftop spaces which could be capitalized for energy transition. And last but not least, I think in the aftermath of the floods that we had recently, this has become even more important that Pakistan actually needs to build a climate safe power system, because we could not simply afford to continue business as usual. And net metering could play a very important role in driving this and leapfrogging renewable energy. So overall, yeah, net metering actually builds a very strong, logical, and compelling case for advancement in the power sector, and it could have great benefits for easing the energy price burden and having a more affordable, secured energy supply system. And if we look, I mean, despite all this, if we look at the installed capacity of distributed generation so far, here you can see the left graph shows the year-wise installed capacity of net metered systems. The right graph shows the utility-wise growth of distributed generation. And we see that so far in the past 7 years, we have only reached 450 megawatts of installed capacity. And this is very low. This contrasts very poorly with the broader region where Bangladesh, for instance, is an emerging hotspot for rooftop solar applications, where we have Vietnam. In Vietnam, the DG solar has crossed 9 gigawatts. In India, it has crossed 5 gigawatts. So, and overall, this I think makes only 1% of our installed capacity, which is quite minimal. And we also have this aligned problem of geographic uneven uptake. What is happening in Pakistan is that certain utilities have not even embraced the distributed generation regulations, and they are barely participating in it. And this is why we see this geographic skewed growth, which needs to be, which is a key problem presently. And briefly talking about the barriers and challenges in the existing socio-technical system, I think a key problem is that Pakistan, I mean, we have these ambitious policies, but there is no clear target for rooftop solar. There is no clear target for net metering growth. So this is a key policy constraint or barrier. And we have this serious problem of legitimacy challenge. That is, we have rolled out policies, we have rolled out regulations for enabling online distributed generation. However, it has weak compliance. In the case of utilities, I would say that it is totally up to the utilities whether they want to embrace it, whether they want to disregard it entirely. And there is no proper mechanism of sanctions or proper monitoring evaluation which could assess the growth that is happening, or who could look into the problems why in geographic configuration where it is not taking up. And another important barrier when it comes to decentralized renewable application is that solar technology comes with a high upfront cost. And what is happening in Pakistan is that we have this subsidized financial scheme, which provides loans to people at very easy terms, but many commercial banks have distanced themselves from renewable energy financing, and they shy away because of the high perceived risks in the area of renewable energy. And so we see a skewed concentration of distributed generation where it is taking place only in the resourceful sections of society, and it is undermining equitable distribution of solar PV uptake. I would leave the regulatory constraints to Ms. Amina because she knows the field much more extensively than me. But I would only mention here that Pakistan actually, we our net metering growth or our rooftop solar growth is largely driven by host-owned installations, and we as such have not seen any participation from private investors, from commercial actors in this market. And in peer regional countries in Bangladesh, India, or all in the globe, third-party investor models and corporate activity is actually driving the rooftop solar growth. And this is also one of the key reason that has this business model lag has hampered the growth of net metered systems in Pakistan. So on this point, I would just conclude my presentation and leave the floor to the rest of the panelists to build on this argument further. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Naila. And I totally agree with you that it's DG is a win-win situation for Pakistan, as we already have the burden of unplanned capacity on us, and the DG can reduce the losses and also reduce the cost burden on it. But the graph you showed, we can see that still we have the uneven distribution of DG in different discos. So what do you think? What are the possible reasons why these discos are reluctant to cater the net metering or DG? What could be the possible reasons?
Yeah, this is a very important question, and maybe Amjad Saab would further reflect on it. But how I look at it is that distributed generation is a new concept even for utilities, and they have not received the capacity support for operating this technology. And as I mentioned earlier, that there is, it is totally the discretion of the utilities whether they want to participate in it, whether they don't want to embrace it. And in those utilities which have, I would say, which are lagging behind in human resource, which are lagging behind technology wise, they are primarily more reluctant to embrace it. And this is I think a key institutional misalignment that we are looking at and responsible for the uniform growth.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Naila. As Naila has pointed out that what are the benefits of DG in Pakistan, that how we can reduce the cost and losses. And also she pointed out some constraints which are regulatory and financial. So I will request Ms. Amina Sohail if she can just shed some light on regulatory constraints in Pakistan about net metering. Over to you, Amina. Thank you.
Thank you, Rida, and Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you, Naila, for leaving the regulatory aspects for me to talk further on that and elaborate on that. First of all, I think we all have agreement that the electricity costs have increased prohibitively in our country. And as you're well aware that the fuel price adjustment has been the one single component which has really made people to bring their electricity bills to the roads, and there have been huge agitations that the government has to. They haven't really taken them back because they have simply sort of deferred and increase the time for recovery of those amounts on the basis of which electricity was produced, because it is mainly because of the extensive fuel, and so much so that per unit cost have gone up beyond ₹50, which is too much. So primarily the cost of electricity is one of the most economic factor that if could be if it could be used and advocated for the uptake and expeditious uptake of solarization in the country. As far as net metering is concerned, this is just to connect with what Naila had mentioned in her presentation. If we look at the history of net metering in Pakistan and why history is important, it is to appreciate the level of acceptance of the concept of net metering in Pakistan. We had our first alternative and renewable energy policy back in 2006, and net metering was a part of that policy. However, the mechanism for rolling out net metering, how it would be undertaken, how the distribution companies are going to interact with their distributed generator applicants, all of that system could not be put in place until 2015. It is the time when these regulations were notified by NEPRA. So we find that we undertook upon ourselves to include a particular concept in our policy. And further on, we just sat over it and we could not come up with a workable plan or mechanism under which the consumers can interact with their distribution companies. And it only came in 2015, and the gift that even the consumers, which was quite odd because of this generation provision in the law, and which has been recently back in April 22, that this provision has been removed because under the 2018 NEPRA Amendment Act, there is this provision that of gradual removal of requirement for getting license for generation. So NEPRA taking initiative from that, and I hope there must have been a matter of policy domain on the part of the federal government to take away this this embargo on or the entry ban for generators to generate without seeking NEPRA license. So as far as net metering installation holders or the solar installation holders, and from now on, since April 2022, there is no more required to get a license from NEPRA, and distribution companies have been asked to process as if they are the licensees of NEPRA. I think the deemed license concept has been utilized by NEPRA because there could be no clear policy directive from the government, and NEPRA took it upon itself to use it as a deemed licensing and to ease out the prospective applicants of net metering arrangements because it had a process lag involved, because there was this application to be made to NEPRA and NEPRA forwarding it to the distribution company, and then distribution company taking its own time in approval of the system requirements and then actual installation of the metering equipment. If we could divide the various components of the net metering arrangement, we could see that while, yes, there is a financial gap which needs to be tapped by the financial institutions to promote uptake of solarization in the country or home-based solar solutions, and that could be through net metering arrangement. But what we really find to be very interesting is the fact that while NEPRA Act under the 2018 amendment has divided the distribution system business into wire business and supply business. So what net metering involves is basically supply arrangement, a consumer-owned part supply arrangement. What I mean to say is the part supply arrangement, because the generation is happening at the consumer-owned premises. So there is no outside generator is involved. So that kind of risk which Naila mentioned in terms of the payment of capacity or the or taking on the capacity obligations on its behalf by CPPAG and all that, and then responding contribution to circular debt. So that part is taken care of. One. Second, that ultimately the only role that the distribution companies would have to play would to take care of their wires, and that includes the transmission system, the sub-transmission system, which is at the distribution level, the distribution voltage level, at which a distributed generation gets connected to the system of the distribution company, so that in case, first of all, to sell its own extra power, one, and second, to have a standalone, a buyback arrangement, so that when its own system is unavailable, definitely when there is no sun, they need to get back to the utility-backed system. So what it really invites us to see that what is the real incentive with the distribution companies when we complain that why the distribution companies are not cooperating or not what you can say facilitating uptake of net metering, because I, being on the board of Islam Supply Company as well, can very well know the complaints that I receive from a lot of such interested applicants of net metering, that the meters are not being installed timely. They're quite lengthy lags of its installation, and basically these are supply chain issues, one, and that non-appreciation of customer service. But you see, the customers that are the regular customers who are hooked to the distribution company system for receipt of power as per its system availability, right? But in case of net metered consumers, or the distributed generated consumers, they have this extra sort of responsibility, which to me is not sufficiently backed by the licensing arrangement. So once NEPRA takes care of the performance parameters in terms of trippings and how you are maintaining the quality and stuff like that, there could be simultaneously some provisions inbuilt in the NEPRA licenses or the respective distribution performance standard rules that you over and above your regular customer service responsibilities under your licensing as a distributor or as a supplier. Because from now on, ISCO also has submitted its separate licensing applications to act as a distributor and to act as a supplier, because they cannot continue, because their previous license has expired, and now they have to function under the new arrangement post 2018 amendment. So I think this is a suggestion which should go from this forum, and I'll also, of course, try to push it at respective forums, that there should be some appropriate regulations or rules which should monitor the facilitation of distributed generators by the distribution companies. And I take it akin to the non-discriminatory access to system, which is the responsibility of a wire service provider under the law. Because NEPRA is spearheading the competitive bilateral market trading arrangement, CTBCM. So the kind of system NEPRA is making awareness on and holding seminars, they are basically focusing on bulk power consumers and more of the wheeling arrangements and stuff like that. But I think net metering is that low-hanging fruit. If that could be, worked on, some extra measures and some awareness programs, some targets would be given from the regulator. Because if we take it from the perspective of a government, when there is a regulatory regime in the country, then it is the job of the regulator to make sure that the needs of the various stakeholders of the sector are adequately met with. They are doing this IGSEP, Integrated Generation Expansion Plan. Where is that idea of net metering absorption in the overall IGSEP? I might have failed to notice that, but I doubt that it has been factored in by NTDC which under the law has been asked to prepare the integrated generation expansion plan and approved by which has been approved by NEPRA, by the way. So our planning should be geared towards reaping this low-hanging fruit, one. Second, some regulatory incentives and some measures, both in terms of carrot and stick policy, that there should be incentives for the distribution company. Because you see, if we would like to move on the competitive bilateral market trading arrangement, what does that shows? That from that protective environment that our power sector used to be in and still continues to be, because as long as we have these watertight contracts, the IPP contracts, we cannot really say that we'll have competition, because competition is about spare capacity. We do not have that kind of a spare capacity or the kind of merchant plants that are required to instill that competition in the generation market. Because what CTPCM basically talks about is the competition in the market, and the competition in the market would only come if you have excess capacity. We do have excess capacity, but we have fuel supply constraints. So in a way, that fuel constraints have almost suffocated our excess capacity as well. And because of the contractual arrangements, that excess capacity is of no use to us. So coming back to net metering issues, these are few arrangements that NEPRA should think over and should come forward with its due regulatory role. Because lastly, we have rural electrification programs. But unfortunately, as Naila also pointed out quite well, that this is not the case of business as usual. And particularly with 1/3 of our country submerged underwater, we need to look for all sorts of alternatives to make our country energy secure. We are highly, like, I feel myself insecure when when one proclaims one thing, it is a sign of panic. But I think it is indeed a panic situation where we have generators, on in commercial areas for the full day. Look at the climate cost of it, the fuel cost of it. So solarization should be motivated with all sorts of innovative ideas, be that we have, by the way, Naila mentioned that we do not have those models, but I think these models need to be propagated more. There are certain companies who are like developers, and they're having PPAs with the owners of the premises where the solar PV panels are installed, and under that PPA arrangement, the financing costs are also paid off. So these arrangements are very much going on, and I think it's just a matter of further propagating similar arrangements or doing some case studies over it, so that we could further fine tune as to why they are not being, being used or fashioned at a faster pace. And lastly, I think distributed generation means that, yes, there is a grid. And I mentioned about the rural electrification policy in Pakistan. So rural electrification policy, basically, there is no rural electrification policy in Pakistan. And mainly what happens that the funds are doled out to our parliamentarians and under the tag of development budget. And that budget, if they are unable to, if they're able to save it from building a dispensary or a school or a road, then some amount is left for laying down of certain lines. But all that infrastructure, first of all, is not well planned. It adds to the cost of the distribution company. So if you would really like to service those areas, then we should fashion the microgrids. NEPRA should take a lead as to how the electrification in our country should be promoted in ways other than the way we have been doing since, I think, 70s. We need to think of certain other ways. For example, once the power towers were down, because of flood. The whole of Balochistan was without electricity. So this more propagates and advocates for development of microgrids, and EPRA has, by the way, come up with regulations for that as well, and licensing arrangement. But merely coming up with regulatory instruments is not enough unless. So what it appears that there is a complete dissynchronization between the policymaker and the regulator, and somehow the regulator is unable to perceive the real problems of the power sector in our country, because power sector is not just about IPPs and discos and the NTDC and the people in our cities or the urban centers. Power sector is also about the people who are not having power in our country, still do not have power, or the power for the time that it could be rated as, yes, people have power for at least, let's say, 8 to 10 hours. Let's forget that if they have power for the 24 hours. So all the hospitals that are suffering because of non-availability of power, all the schools that are not being run because of non-availability of power in our far-flung areas of Balochistan and KP. So solar power is the solution for those areas. And I think NEPRA and government should sit down and think of some innovative ideas to promote electrification of those areas based on AI.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Amina.
If there are other aspects to be addressed, we can take it in the question answer session. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Amina, and I totally agree with you. And I think it's the high time that we think about the solarization of Pakistan, because the climate crisis we saw in Pakistan, it's you just mentioned that 1/3 of the Pakistan is already underwater. So it's the high time that we think about the solarization of countries. So it will increase the security of the country too. And the point you mentioned that we should take the point of discriminative service to the customers to dispose, and we will happy to take that point there. And I will just conclude your points that you said that the process lag is not an issue now, but the issue is of the supply chain and the customer service from the dispos, because dispos are the license, as we have a representative from dispos today. So let's see what he has to say about this issue. What are the supply chain issues dispos are facing, and what are the customer services that can be done to improve the uptake of DG in dispos. So over to you, Amjad Saab, if you can just shed some light on it, on the side issue.
Sorry, can you repeat? I'm sorry. I thought you were just, recapitulating the points. If you could just repeat the last question that you raised.
So I was just concluding your points that you said that supply chain is the issue with discos and the customer service is the issues with disco. The one you said that you faced from different customers. So I'm just saying to Mr. Amjad that he can explain it. What are the issues discos are facing in implementation of.
Let's welcome Amjad Saab. Sorry for the intervention.
No problem, Amina. Over to you, Amjad Saab.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Rida, for inviting me to this talk. I will just probably turn off my video to have a good bandwidth. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Amjad Islam. I'm working as Deputy Manager in PESCO for the last 20 years. And before coming to this talk, I was thinking that probably I was the one who will take the grunt of this talk because of the issues involved with the discos. The general perception in the public is not that good. But, at disco level, we have our own problems. I mean, at the academic discussion, you can talk a lot of things academically, which are really good on the book. But when it comes to the real ground, I mean, it's really difficult to know the real issues, to have a good grasp of the ground realities. So I will try my best to wrap up my presentation in the allotted time. Though I have around 20, no, 11, 10 or 11 slides. So let me first share with you my presentation. Yeah, I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So the topic of my talk today, which I have been invited to, is the challenges faced by the DISCOs in a net metering environment and the impact it has created on the DISCOs. So I will be mainly talking of from the DISCOs perspective. The NEM, which I call it net energy metering, I will be using it repeatedly in my presentation. NEM means net energy metering. And what are the underlying challenges and problems that we are facing in implementing all the regulatory instructions that have been issued by the NEPRA, who is a regulator. But before starting my main topic, let me give you an overview of the NEM scenario in Pakistan. It all started when the NEM regulations were promulgated by a regulator in 2015, which are now everybody knows them as NEPRA, RE, Alternative Renewable Energy Distribution Generation, and Net Metering Regulation 2015. ADB has also issued some guidelines. They worked on these guidelines, and most of the DISCOs in the power sector have adopted those guidelines as SOPs for processing, evaluating, and controlling all the net meter installation from a technical and administrative point of view. In Pakistan, currently NEPRA processes net NEM connections applications from 26,000 kilowatt. So it's like up to 1 megawatt connections from 25 kilowatt and above are going to NEPRA for the processing, and they are issuing licenses. So DISCO is playing only the role of forwarding those applications from the field to the NEPRA, and they are processing and checking, validating, monitoring everything on their own, and they are issuing licenses. And DISCO up to 25 kilowatt, recent amendments, NEPRA has actually authorized DISCOs to process those connections at their own. So up to 25 kilowatts systems, they are being processed at the DISCO level. So if you look at the general criteria of eligibility of NEM, it's only allowed to 3-phase connections from 5 above 5 kilowatt. So no single phase licensing so far, since we don't have any regulations. If it means if someone want to apply for NEM metering having single phase connection, he has to extend his load to at least 5 kilowatt in order to be eligible. And application can be for the load. Any candidate can apply for the load up to 1.5 times of the sanctioned load of that consumer. So these are just the overview and the current regulations that we are actually complying. The NEPRA, which has already been issued by the NEPRA. Next, if you look at the NEM installed so far in Pakistan, this table is a company-wise breakup of the yearly installation of the NEM in different DISCOs in the private sector. We don't see any encouraging results, but it's picking up momentum. I think in the last year, it was around 145 megawatt. And for the around total installed capacity all over the Pakistan in DISCOs as well as in private, it's around 232 megawatt of PV rooftop solar NEM has been installed since the notification of the regulations. The data for the year 2022 has not been released. This data is for the last year. And if, as you can see on the right top on the table, that is the state of the industry report issued by NEPRA for 2021. And I'm pretty confident that this figure is going to jump over more than 500% this year. Okay, so now coming back to the main topic, major stakeholders in the whole game are discos. And unfortunately, the major bottleneck in the whole process is also discos. Generally speaking, we can categorize these challenges that the discos are facing and implementing the regulatory instructions into two groups, which I have categorized as technical and financial. In technical challenge, we have the first one related to the infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure that we have inherited from the past in the last 100 years, and its weakness. I will be talking about some of its weaknesses and limitation. Secondly, we have lack of technical training. I would say the most important challenge is the lack of training and skills to the field staff, which they have some level of working experience and skills for the conventional system, but they don't have any knowledge and experience to understand the complexities of new technologies. Third, we have no uniform standards. That is again an issue that we are facing. The technical equipment and devices that are being installed at the NEM site for various component devices and rooftop solar. The most important being the meter, the bidirectional meter, that is still not being standardized, and consumer is buying on itself from the market. Okay, second category of group of challenges is financial. We have the first one is revenue erosion. The revenue erosion or decrease in revenue due to shifting of consumer on NEM, and the recovered amount, which is on the decreasing side due to non-availability of consumers or exit of the prosumers from the company or the discos revenue cycle. Second, we have another phenomena which is very common in developing economies, is cross subsidy, which means that socially low income consumers are subsidized by the rich and well-off consumer. And that is a requirement that the government policies for the social support to the low income people. Next, we have stranded cost, capital cost. We invest in the grid for the maintenance, upgradation, and stuff like that. The next is the new initiative, the transition from the single buyer model to the CTBCM, which is a wholesale power market. Pakistan is opening its market for the wholesale, and it has also its implication when we talk in context of NEM. So starting off, let's take these points in a little bit detail. On technical side, the first challenging issue is the distribution system, which has evolved from the last 100 years or so, and it has its limitation and operational mechanism which cannot be altered overnight. While the legacy system, as you all might be aware of, is a one-way unidirectional transmission highway. Invention of the distribution generation in the form of rooftop solar has created a major problem for the system. And the system was actually not designed for the bidirectional transmission of power. Our grids and related infrastructure has not been modernized with the emerging of new technologies, and grid resiliency is still a far-fetched dream, I would say. Under the tremendous challenge of global climate issues and transition to renewable energy from the fossil fuels, and also it was economical, and it was also has a low maintenance and other benefits. It offered outstanding incentive for the integration of this technology in the distribution system. So being one of the example, it leads government to provide incentive and use in private investment. But the fact is that our distribution system has a huge challenge of upgradation and huge investment cost is needed to enable the system to cope with the integration of new technologies such as NEM. This existing system actually is being run with poor maintenance and no upgradation. As you say, may not, this is the low upgradation challenge is a barrier in capitalizing on the benefits of low cost distributed energy. On the other side, overloading of the local distribution transformers enforce the operator of the wired business to cap the NEM installation and we can installation on the particular distribution transformer. And we are only allowing the NEM on the 80% of the local distribution transformer load. And that has been capped similarly on the 11 kV lines. The total NEM has been capped at 30% of the tolerance level of that 11 kV line. So again, these are some of the limitations that are there in the system inherently, and we have inherited from the legacy system. The safety concerns have also been increased. That is another challenging task that the discos are facing, and they need to look at it. The fragile system and the limitations on one hand, we see that in the load management scenario, consumers are unable to backfeed energy to the grid. If the line is not, if the electrons are not flowing in the line, consumers cannot backfeed the energy to the grid. On the other hand, rooftop solar without NEM, those consumers which have installed the solar, but they are not enrolled, subscribed as NEM, they also pose a threat to the safety of the people and line workers, particularly to the grid that are working to remove the faults in case of any mishap. So solar generation case of non-NEM consumer are not being regulated, and the safety concern mechanism is not there to avoid any accidents. So next, we can say it's a burning issue, and we are working on it. Training of line workers to work safely with full understanding of the modern technologies and cope with an emergency. Even the capabilities in the processing and the installation of NEM applications is limited, and they are still working in the manual procedures. They are following the manual procedures. Most of the work for the NEM application process is done by the private vendors. The utility staff lack this understanding and technology, and relying on those private vendors for the processing of the NEM application. So understanding and training of the line workers as well as the office workers is also crucial, and currently is a major barrier in processing the huge amount of applications that we are receiving on daily basis. So on the technical side, lack of capacity, again, we can say that if you got the NEM connection and it's up and running, we are facing again in some reading and billing issues. The skills, the skills needed to record the correct reading and feed it into the system for billing. Again, that's I mean, it needs thorough understanding and the way the system, the mechanism works. Next, we have that the NEM standards. I did touch on this in the previous slides. We still don't have any specifications for the uniform standards for the bi-directional meter. These meters are still being purchased by the consumers, and DISCOs are only testing them and validating their parameters and working and certify them, and they are being installed. So we don't have any specifications from the regulator or NTDC, which is our mainly the body which specified these standards. So on the revenue side, 4 points I have listed. The main in financial impact, we can say that the financial impact that is being taken as a challenge because of the financial implication of the NIM. So in financial, we have loss, or other, I would say, reduction in revenue from the shifting of those prosumers from the disco billing system to the NEM regime. The number of prosumers switching off the energy sources is still on the lower side, but the last couple of years, it has picked momentum and a higher penetration. We see a high penetration in the NIM. It would mean that DISCO would lose their revenue in the shape of less money received proportionately, and on top of that, DISCO will be paying the consumers in the form of paying credit in their bills. Ideally, such a revenue reduction is compensated by allowance of adjustments in tariff by the regulator, but so far we don't have any such kind of allowance allowed by the NEPRA. Ironically, on the other side, the diffusion of NEM in Pakistan is gradually on the rise in the profit-making areas of the DISCOs, where low cost and high revenue collection from the DISCO point of view is more critical and compensating the high loss and low revenue areas. But high loss, low revenue areas are still lagging in penetration of NEM, which is again a big challenge. Cross subsidy, again, I mean, it means a reduced sale for the DISCO, which ultimately lifts the cost that would spread across fewer kilowatt hour, and thus I would say a high price for kilowatt hour. This cost would be offset by the other consumer feeding from the grid, at least in part, by the benefits that describe that distributed generation providers to the grid. Non-subscribed consumers would cross-subsidize the subscribed NEM consumers, I would say, distribute energy in the form of rooftop solar, since are being subscribed by the consumer, are feeding from the profit-making 11 kV lines, resulting in revenue erosion of DISCO, which will be shifted in tariff, resulting in increased tariff burden on the non-subscribed DE consumers. So generally, less recovery of cost burden will shift towards the consumer still present in the system to bear the cost. And this can create a vicious cycle, a vicious circle for, I would say, for more consumer which are opting out from the DISCO to install NEM. Next point is the stranded cost. It is somewhat related to previous.
Sorry to interrupt you because of the time constraint. So I would request you to please try to close it in 1 to 2 minutes because of our.
Okay, I will try. I will take let's say 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So stranded cost means the capital cost that has already been invested in the grid for the maintenance of gradation by the DISCO. Regulator allow its recovery from the end consumer along with a reasonable return. So in case of more and more consumers are switching off from the DISCO cycle, again, the same thing, the same phenomena, share of the grid cost, DISCO would not be able to expand and maintain the wide business. And secondly, this cost would need to be shifted to the non-NEM consumers. Implication for the wholesale power market. Lastly, the most important, the most historic moment, in the transition is the transition in the power sector of Pakistan from a single buyer model to a multi-buyer, because we say it wholesale market. The market is under trial run and will kickstart its operation from next year. Under market regime, it will be challenging for the DISCOs to buy capacity from the system in order to comply the capacity obligation and regulation that have been barred on the by the regulator on the DISCOs. The open competition means DISCOs would have to forecast accurately and measure the NEM implication for the system. So I wish I could talk on some of the opportunities rooftop PV offers, but since I was asked to point out the challenges, I tried my best to keep the topic on target. But to conclude my presentation, I wanted to talk about some of the suggestion. Investment on people is the key, the one and the most important critical part. No new technology or policy would probably be achieved without investing in training on our workforce. We need to work on the specification and standards also that are hampering the name in Pakistan, creating barriers unnecessary. New business models and liberty of discourse to carve out on the plans to work on the rooftop solar present PV penetration in the high loss area specifically. This is the most critical part. If we want to capitalize on the NEM, then we have to somehow try to try to penetrate this technology in the high loss area. This is probably most important and opportunity offering area for the discourse. If they can capitalize on the cheap solar energy to the last mile consumer to lift the whole power sector and make it profitable. Just to one last comment, rooftop solar, actually, I would say for personally, it's a game changer in the energy sector. It involves, it solves all our problems, taking from energy excess and most importantly, displacing the costly fossil fuel from the energy mix. But at the same time, it also addresses the climate issue in Pakistan. And Pakistan, for the time being, is most impacted by the climate disaster. We are still going through this sufferings. We need to synchronize. I think we need to synchronize our energies to promote this solar technology to achieve the climate goals and for the sake of our energy system and for the sake of our next generation, I would say. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amjad, and thank you for pointing out pointing out the issues discourse are facing in promoting in installation of net metering. So now I would like to invite Dr. Atif Pervez for explaining the role of storage in net metering, how storage can help to improve the help the net metering to flourish in Pakistan. Over to you, Amjad. Sorry, over to you, Atif Sab. Asad, can you please unmute him?
Ji, I am unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, sir. Atif, we cannot hear you. No, still not.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me. Hello, everyone. My name is Saeed Atif Pervez, and I'm working at the Battery Research Lab in Montreal in a company called NanoExplore. I had a chance to listen to some of the participants' presentation, and well, my topic is about the role of battery energy storage in coupled with a net metering system. So I'll be predominantly talking about this topic. I think I don't have, by the way, a presentation, so I'll be speaking more, so you guys have to bear with me. Before starting and getting into the technology aspects of batteries, it's important for me to just emphasize a little bit about the role of battery storage system in a net metering system, for example, where the battery storage system is coupled with a photovoltaic, like a solar panel in most cases, and how this can actually benefit. Firstly, in a country like Pakistan, but this is also very much applicable globally, is that we want to improve, the energy resilience, and also there is this objective to reduce the electricity bill. So by having such system installed, it can actually help a lot. This is also going to be a viable alternative to the conventional diesel or gasoline generated power generators that we have. And that is our contribution towards less carbon emission and clean energy, which is so much important, especially in the context where our country is one of the most affected by climate change. So this is something which is very important. One important thing, having a battery storage system installed at the premises of the customer is that customer has got stake in the process. He's actually an investor where he owns a part of the system and he has the liberty to sell that energy when and if he wants to the grids, or if he wants to utilize it for his personal uses. And another important point is that for industrial customers in particular, where production happens, and this is very important, that a continuous supply of energy is ensured. So in that case, such battery storage systems, when designed properly with proper technology, can actually help mitigate those disruptions in power supply, and actually they can provide high quality power, which is of course going to help in increasing the economic growth of our country. So these are the important points, and I think that is really important in a sense that this system should be installed or coupled with a net metering. But then what is going to be the technology? That is an important question which we hear. As of now, is the most important and the most viable technology in terms of performance and cost is going to be the lithium-ion battery technology. Okay, I'm aware that back home, predominantly on a very small scale consumer level, lead acid has been the go-to technology because of cost effectiveness. But if we do proper analysis in terms of performance, longevity, and all that, lithium-ion battery is a technology which will eventually be going to be much cheaper and more reliable. And this is also internationally that in countries like where I live, or in Europe or in Asia, where installation happens for a battery storage system, predominantly is going to be based on lithium-ion battery. Now the question is, why lithium-ion battery? Well, the first important thing is that this is that technology which can offer you the best energy and power uh, uh, with respect to the cost as well. There has a lot of improvement in the technology and in terms of cost over the last decade, like from 2010 until 2020, there is about 90% cost reduction, which means the technology is getting cheaper by the day, which means that for a country like Pakistan, it's going to be more affordable in the future as well. Even now, I think it's affordable. So that is another important point. Plus, the technology itself is so responsive that for purposes such as peak shaving and load leveling on a grid storage, the response could be in milliseconds. So if such a quick response you can get from the storage device, it means that it will be really effective to be integrated in that system. So these are just a few of many other advantages that we can have of the battery. But of course, we have to come to the main point, which is the cost, and how can the cost be reduced. And by the way, this is not a problem on Pakistan level, but this is also an international problem or a challenge, how to reduce the prices further. Now, first point that comes to mind is that the choice of chemistry. So as you guys know, a battery, a lithium-ion battery is an electrochemical device, which we have a set of electrode, electrolyte, the lithium-ion moves into, and the electron moves in the outer circuits, and that's how it powers your load. So there is this technology predominantly called NMC. This is a technology which is very popular for high-end applications such as electric vehicle. Now, you can imagine electric vehicle is a kind of application where you want high power from battery, the energy should be high, but then you're always limited by the space in weight. You don't have a lot of space actually, so the volume is always low. And also you need to make your batteries not that heavy. So weight-wise, they should not be that heavy, right? Luckily, so that is the NMC chemistry. There's another chemistry called LFP, which is relatively cheap. It can run for very long, but it may probably not be that much suitable for EV application. However, it can still be suitable for BSS, like battery storage system, because there we are not that much concerned about space. So what eventually happens is that you're going to install a battery unit somewhere at the premises of a customer, and you are not really bothered about the size, how much space it's going to take and how heavy it's going to be. So there, by switching to cheap chemistries, there is a possibility that we may reduce the cost. Another important point, which I would really like to mention, is that as you guys may know, that there is a big boom in the EV industry of late. A lot of companies in North America, in Europe, in Asia, on government level and private investors, there are a lot of them are investing in the field of lithium-ion batteries. One of the most popular application is electric vehicle. Now, a typical average electric vehicle come with about around 12 to 1500 cells. For electric vehicle, once the battery from new battery, which is like 100% brand new, once it reaches to 80% of its allotted capacity or energy, for EV application, that battery is called end of life battery. Like that is considered dead. However, those second life batteries, which still, by the way, contain 80% of energy, could be useful for applications such as battery storage systems. So there, the battery storage companies could actually purchase them from the OEMs, from car companies, and they can assemble them in different configuration to suit the needs of their customers, who can actually use them as a backup storage, behind the meter backup storage, and connect it to the grid. Lastly, another important point is that instead of lithium-ion batteries, there are also other competing technologies which can also eventually come to market. In fact, some of them, if I would like to name one, sodium-ion battery is another technology which is very popular. Now, sodium-ion battery cannot compete lithium-ion battery technology in terms of performance, like the energy that you can get. Especially there are these different parameters like gravimetric energy or volumetric energy. However, as I said, in a BSS system, we are not really bothered about the size and weight. So since we have that luxury, a sodium-ion battery can take over lithium-ion battery. The cost of lithium-ion battery is also high because there are rare earth elements that being used, which are difficult. The availability is difficult. They are difficult to mine, and most of them, they are located in geopolitical regions which are really hard to get into. So that actually disrupt the supply chain. Sodium-ion batteries, the precursor is one of the main precursor is what sodium chloride, which is salt, right? We have abundant of salt everywhere, even in Pakistan. So that is something which can actually help to reduce the cost, and that could be one technology for the future, which can actually replace lithium-ion battery. Not now, but research and development is still going on. So with that, now I would like to touch a little bit how can decision makers in Pakistan actually encourage the adoption of behind the meter battery storage system. And I think this is something really important. I know we have challenges. Previous presenter, Amjad Saab, also touched upon that, and I know there are issues. However, this is something for the future, and we have to be proactive. So Something that comes to mind is the first and important thing is to provide financial incentives. And I mean, here the role could be from all of us. This could be policymakers or all the stakeholders involved in the power system there back home. So the first and important, and government, of course. So the first and important thing is to provide financial incentives in the form of, well, I don't know, low interest loans or tax credits, you know, that could actually drive the adoption of this targeted BSS systems. And that could also be directed specifically towards low-income customers, because purchasing a battery or investing in a battery is a big hurdle for them. So that is important. Another important thing is that the government should establish, and all the stakeholders should establish mandatory targets that if there is a new installation going on, a battery should be part of that. And a good technology based on lithium-ion battery and you know, all the technological aspects are being considered. So that is going to be mandatory, and that's how it's going to help you know, accelerating this process. And lastly, I would like to mention is that since it's a rather new technology, net metering itself is a new technology, by the way. So that technology awareness is important, and people should be facilitated into that transition process. So basically, we are now transitioning from a fossil fuel economy towards the renewable. And that process, honestly speaking, is not that easy. So just to facilitate that process, I don't know, by making the system automated, or, you know, just make the process less painful for the customer, so they could easily get into that. There are a couple of other points that I would like to touch upon here. In countries like in North America or in Europe, there are these different business models that have been discussed, so that they could help in installing so that it could help the customers to take that decision to install a BSS system at their premises. So one is this so-called energy storage as a service model. This is something which is being considered a lot, and there basically the utilities or the developer own and operate the BMS system in exchange for paying the upfront cost of the storage system. So customer, in exchange for regular or bi-weekly payments, they get the services. So that is something which can actually work. There's this another business model that is very popular here, which is called bring your own device, BOYD. Basically, this model is also very efficient, and it can work where the utilities or developers pay for access to a customer energy storage system. So in this case, customer is going to own, but during periods when the storage would otherwise be utilized. So that's another system which is important. So I believe these are some of the points. I don't think we have a lot of time. I just made my presentation for 15 minutes. So I hope I'm within the time limit. Yeah, so that's what it is. Just to sum it up, I believe battery is going to be a part of a system with net metering. It is a very important system just to improve the energy resilience and improve the power quality, not to mention the power outage that a lot of our customer back home face in Pakistan. So it could improve that quality of power. And I think this is something really for the future. We should invest as soon as possible. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, you can ask in the chat or directly from me. Thanks a lot.
And thank you. Thank you so much, Atif, and I totally agree with you that storage is the future for net for if it's in a DG or it's on a utility scale. So as you mentioned that the cost of the storage can be reduced. because sodium-ion batteries can be a good option for that, and the requirement of DG is not the high-density batteries, the size is not an issue. But as you know, that planning is important factor in anything. So if we just increase, let's suppose if we have a utility scale, we have a BES, battery energy storage power plant. So you know that the lifetime of the batteries is sometimes it's 10 years or 5 years. Lithium ions, it's 8 to 10 years. So once they will be degraded, fully degraded, how we can dispose them? And then we cannot just put them in the open environment. Is there any process to dispose them of? Or
That's a
we
very
can
good,
recycle them?
yeah. That's a very good question. And actually, I was supposed to touch upon that as well, but anyways, because of time constraint. But thank you, you brought up this question. Disposing chemicals or the chemicals inside a cell is actually, again, it's actually a technical way of doing that. You just simply cannot throw them or in the normal garbage. So to dispose of batteries, there is a certain procedure because they have some environmental issues that may arise by having the discarded cells in open environment. So that is an issue. But you know, I look into the other side. There are a lot of businesses out there which actually specifically work in recycling the battery materials. So as I said, a battery, the batteries that we have, lithium-ion batteries, have rare earth metal. Lithium itself is very, very precious metal. So if you can somehow recycle, and of course, there's a technical expertise are involved there. So firstly, there will be companies out there which will take them from the customer, which will collect all these batteries, and then they will sell it to some other companies, or even if they have the expertise, they can actually recycle it. And that's the proper way. But disposing them, I mean, like here in Canada, for example, we have certain spots allocated where we normally dispose these batteries, but those, as I said, are being connected to the recycled companies, and eventually those cells go there and they take care of that. So I think that's the process which is going to be implemented in future once we are dealing with the used batteries. I hope this answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Atif.
There
I
is one question. I don't know if I can go directly to the chat or if you want. Yeah, so there is
can,
one. Yeah, please go ahead.
I have shared my email address, and I asked the participant to send their question answer on my email address. Then I will forward these questions to you, and you can answer them because we are already running out of time.
Okay.
So I'm so sorry for that. And please send your questions at my email address. I have shared it in comment box, and then we can I will send those questions to our panelists. Thank you all the participants and all the speakers for your time. Thank you so much.